It is 12:01, so we're going to get started. My name is Liz Smith. I am the Creeks Outreach Coordinator at the City of Santa Barbara. And here with me, I have Jen Hollywood, our Creeks Administrative Specialist, and our presenter today is Jill Murray, the Creeks Division's Water Quality Research Coordinator. So we are recording this presentation. We are also live streaming on Facebook. If you have questions for Jill, please submit them in the Q&A field on Zoom or on Facebook, and she'd be happy to answer those. And since we just have an hour here for your lunchtime, we are going to go ahead and get started. So Jill, take it away.
Great. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Which means I need to get. Okay, so you can see my first slide. Perfect. Okay, so what's new with beach water quality? Well, first we're going to have to look at a little history to see how we got here to even care about what's new with beach water quality. So for those of you that don't know, I'm going to first talk about the Creeks Division. The Creeks Division was formed in 2000, and it was after some new rules came into being for monitoring and reporting beach water quality, which I'll get into. And then right after that, that's called AB 411. Right after that was a big El Nino, and that led to a lot of beach warnings. And it was very concerning for residents of Santa Barbara, both environmentalists and business community. And they came together and put Measure B on the ballot, which was passed overwhelmingly. And it raised the hotel tax from 10 to 12%. And that went to fund the Creeks Division with the mission of improving creek and ocean water quality and restoring natural creek systems. We also have a Creeks Advisory Committee and that meets monthly. So a little bit of background, the AB 411 requires counties to sample beaches weekly, primarily in considered the summer months, April 1st to October 31st. Our county samples all year. They sample for ocean water for fecal indicator bacteria, including total coliform, fecal coliform, Enterococcus, and a ratio. And they report the results weekly, and you can get them on the website. And then NGOs such as Heal the Bay then can calculate letter grades from the monitoring results, and they release a yearly beach report card. So when we first started the Creeks Division, when the Creeks Division first started, and based on the charter, our big question was, how can we reduce indicator bacteria at beaches, creeks, and storm drains? And we put in some early water quality improvement projects, such as ultraviolet disinfection, low flow storm drain diversions, and bioswales. And we got a lot of state grant money to do this from some propositions, and it was called the Clean Beaches Initiative at the state level. We weren't able to reduce fecal indicator bacteria levels using these methods. So we went back and asked the questions, why are there so many fecal indicator bacteria at this beach, creek, or storm drain? And where are these fecal indicator bacteria coming from? And what is the risk associated with them? And fecal indicator bacteria are found in human and animal feces and sewage, and they may indicate an increased health risk, but they don't provide any information on the fecal source that they came from. And so they can come from animal waste that's not nearly as harmful for humans that might be swimming in the beach, but they can also persist in the environment or even grow in sediment and mud and storm drains and kelp on the beach. And they're not generally pathogenic. They're supposed to indicate the presence of pathogens, and but they are all of the beach regulations, all of the monitoring, the weekly warnings, the impaired water body list, the 303D list, if you're familiar with that, TMDLs, which are large regulatory programs that are generated to try to reduce beach warnings, and are all based on indicator bacteria levels. So we started trying to figure out where the indicator bacteria were coming from. And this was in 2003. We started a collaboration with Dr. Patricia Holden at UCSB. And this was during the time that the molecular revolution was sweeping through all fields of science. I came from an oceanography background, And it was just unbelievable what was being learned, the pace that questions were being answered that hadn't been, were only really able to be addressed with a lot of time in front of a microscope, for example. And then the molecular tools really enabled researchers to see which bacteria or organisms were present. The results of our early testing was sobering. We did find human waste coming out of some storm drains, a signal for human waste. That really surprised us. And we didn't find human waste at some of the project sites that we had installed. And the indicator bacteria results did not correlate with the human waste markers that we were testing. So we pushed pause here, and we proposed to the Creeks Advisory Committee that we focus mostly on finding and reducing human waste rather than just general fecal indicator bacteria, due to the fact that untreated human waste carried what we thought was the highest risk for swimming at that time. There wasn't yet epidemiology to back that up, but it seemed to match what we knew about pathogens and the ability of pathogens to infect humans. So then we started microbial source tracking with the emphasis on the tracking. We found the signal for human waste, but where is it coming from? And we looked for what we call direct illicit connections, which is represented on the left side here, where a plumber might accidentally connect a pipe that was supposed to go to a sewer line, but it accidentally went to a storm drain. And then we also looked for what we call indirect illicit connections, and that would be more like a leaking sewer pipe that the leak somehow gets into the storm drain. And we started with 2 projects that were also funded by the Clean Beaches Initiative, and we worked with UCSB and a consultant, Geosyntech. We did a lot of dye studies where we put fluorescent dye in the sewer lines, so that's wastewater, and then we left a fluorometer unattended in a nearby storm drain. And when we would see a peak in fluorescence, we would know that some of the dye was moving from the wastewater pipe to the storm drain. We also used a lot of videoing. And so in this case, videoing of wastewater pipes is very common. Videoing of storm drains is a lot less common. And in this case, we knew that we had some results from testing that we knew we had the human waste marker in this storm drain. And we had used the dye study, so we knew it was kind of coming in within a couple blocks. We had bracketed it, but we could not figure out where. And we put the camera in the storm drain and could see on the top right panel, you could see there's this leak coming from a side drain. And we ran over to a catch basin nearby. The catch basin's dry. Okay, where's that water coming from? And the camera was able to be lifted up, and we could see that the water was seeping in at a joint. As soon as we knew that was happening, our wastewater crew just fixed this within 24 hours, and that leak was totally eliminated. We started seeing some similarities in where we tended to find a problem. And so then we made a map using GIS of all of the potential hotspots. This was with grant money. We did dye testing and camera testing of all of those potential hotspots. And we were able to rule out a lot of areas that might have leaks. The most fun we had was we brought in this world's only sewage sniffing dogs. And that was a great project also in collaboration with UCSB and Environmental Canine Services. And this really helped us rule out at the time, I think we did this in 2010, the widespread dumping of RVs, because we used the dogs to look at every single catch basin or drop inlet that was anywhere near where the RVs were parking. We put together, there's a highly technical manual that was produced by UCSB. There are also other existing highly technical manuals on source tracking for communities to use. But we put together a kind of glossy, just a lot of pictures and case studies that might make it seem doable for a community that's looking to do this kind of work. And this picture is from another case study. This was on Carrillo. There was a couple of laterals that were leaking into the roof of an old storm drain. The storm drain was so old, it was made with brick. So this leak was through the brick and mortar. And once we figured out with the testing and the cameras where it was coming from, we then went and put dye in the toilets of those businesses, and it came right into Mission Creek. And again, as soon as the wastewater crew saw that, they blocked off the storm drain, vacuumed all of that material out, and the businesses had these repaired within 24 hours. So at that point, we thought we had found most of the high-hanging fruit, like any large leaks that we're getting through. Oh, I'm going to go back. Sorry. I want to say that during this time, the beach grade at Mission Creek, East Beach at Mission Creek, was an A+. So again, we're seeing where the real risk of untreated sewage going into the creek, the lagoon, the beach, did not correlate with the grades that were based on the fecal indicator bacteria. So at that point, we thought we had found several examples, and they were fixed right away, of where some sewage was leaking into storm drains. We had found the high-hanging fruit. So then UCSB and Geosyntec got a very large grant and from the Clean Beaches Initiative to study 2 beaches that we hadn't really tackled much yet, East Beach at Sycamore and Ledbetter. And they set out to test numerous hypotheses about where any human waste marker could be coming from. And they ruled out homeless, they ruled out like storms stirring up previously deposited material, they ruled out leaking bathrooms, contaminated groundwater at the beach. But we did find, the city was a stakeholder on this project, and we did find frequent low levels of this human waste marker, which we call HF183. Like they're called detectable but not quantifiable. So above the detection limit, but not anything that we could quantify. And that has been found in other areas as well. And the 2 hypotheses that were not ruled out were actually swimmers themselves. So we call that bather shedding, or swimmers that might have material kind of coming off of them and washing into the surf zone, and currents from some treated wastewater effluent. So that's wastewater effluent that has had the pathogens removed. Also, that study found that most of the FIB, the fecal indicator bacteria, were from dogs and birds. And we were very shocked with this swimmer conclusion. But over time, additional support has been found. There was a similar conclusion found at a study at Goleta Beach by UCSB. Dong Lee has been the lead on these projects, and he's excellent he's a postdoc with Dr. Holden, and he's excellent with these DNA techniques. A very crowded beach in France found an even stronger correlation with swimmers. And then a whole nother method of using bacterial community sequencing. I'm not going to get into the details, but it's a second method that also found support for these conclusions. And then it also turns out that it's not necessarily just human waste, but could also be human skin cells and urine that could be shedding into the environment. So what we're doing currently, we have 2 small projects. We do an annual surveillance of these methods. Like I said, we think we found all of the big sources, but we're continually testing every year a bit to see if we have any new obvious leaks. We're also adding some wet weather testing. We've increased some of our laboratory abilities so we can do more wet weather testing. We're adding the combination with chemical markers and this other technique, the community sequencing I mentioned. And then we're also doing a very pilot scale assessment of the actual risk. And this is where we actually go and measure the pathogens that are present, which from everything we know are just very, very infrequently detected, but we're doing this more methodically. And then we're going to turn to some techniques that have been published in the literature, where those results are taken in combination with what's known about exposure and dose response. And then we can actually say whether we see any sign of a health risk. And the reason we're doing that is because we don't think there will be a health risk, and we might be able to kind of address some of the regulatory situation with that information. So this was from a talk that I just gave, and where really we were sharing our ability to actually reduce human waste with other municipalities in the State Water Board. So how to reduce human waste from storm drains, creeks, ocean, and into the ocean. The first, and sounds glib, but really it's to focus on human waste. If we're focusing on fecal indicator bacteria, that's what we're going to find, and we're going to take different strategies to lower it at the beach. There have been some beaches that were required to really tackle the fecal indicator bacteria levels head on, and they've done things like steam clean the sediment or replace all the sediment or chase away the birds. We're also doing restoration projects, so we don't want to chase away the birds. We don't clean all of the kelp at the beach. We want a robust ecosystem. It also really helps to have a well-funded, nimble water quality program, and we have Measure B and the citizens of Santa Barbara to thank for that. When we have the Measure B money, we can frequently conduct a pilot program that gives us solid results, and we can go out with those results to apply for larger grants. We also remove feces directly. We spend $200,000 a year on Measure B money, cleaning up creeks, beaches, and homeless encampments. And the contractor reported last year picking up over 5,000 piles of feces and 20,000 on trash cans and porta potties. Like I said, we locate sources and fix them immediately. We have a science-driven program. And unlike a lot of other communities, we conduct a lot of our research internally, or we're very involved stakeholders. And that is because we know our beaches, we know our storm drains, we can call up our wastewater colleagues and have a lot of communication and repairs much more quickly than if we were having consultants entirely go out to do this work, for example. We also have been really fortunate to partner with the best in the world, Dr. Holden and Brandon Steets with Geosyntech. Really, we're extremely lucky that we're all close together geographically. We can go sample together, we can plan our sampling together. And we also have a lot of community support, and we try to be very transparent, and we present to the Creeks Advisory Committee on Water Quality at least twice a year and produce reports that are available online for the public. So now kind of what's new with bacteria and beach water quality. The requirements for the beach warnings have changed over time, and there are new criteria for beach water quality, but we don't know when those will be applied to our Central Coast Water Board basin plans, our 303D lists, TMDLs, and even the AB 411 beach warnings and the report cards. All of that remains to be seen. I'm not going to go over the details, but this can just show you that the upshot is that at beaches, indicator bacteria are still used, but we do not use total coliform anymore. We do have still fecal coliforms in California that are regulated, but the rest of the country doesn't use that. And that we predicted that our beach warnings should go down about 25% based on this change in what's required to be tested. And similar conclusion or similar results with creeks and estuaries. And then last summer, we ended up on the Heal the Bays beach bummer list again. And I say we because we are really attached to our beaches. This was East Beach at Mission Creek, and it was on the beach bummer list. We had to go into the data and really try to understand why we were listed. As we were doing that, the media was writing articles about it. So we were on the beach bummer list because a year before that grade was released, there were some rainstorms during that AB 411 season. We had April and May rains that year. I think that was 2019. And the effect of that carried out. Indicator bacteria are always higher at the beaches after storms, but then there was an averaging that took place. And so that average kind of carried forward for several weeks. And that's what led to the low grade at East Beach at Mission Creek. It wasn't because there was anything different coming out. We checked all of our creek data that we monitor. The creek levels were the same as normal. There wasn't anything. We did visual observation. There was nothing new coming into Mission Lagoon or anything like that. The Independent produced an article about the beach bummer, and it really generalized, and they'd had in the past some much more nuanced articles. And so we met, they wrote a second article that had a lot more of the details, some of the things that I've talked to you about in this presentation. And then our local nonprofit, Santa Barbara Channel Keeper, wrote an editorial about all of the great work that the city is doing, still supporting the use of indicator bacteria in some cases, but also supporting what we're doing, which is really going after the human waste. So the last thing I want to do is talk a little bit about the actual risk and what's known. And so previous epidemiology had come out, and these were studies that looked at people who didn't swim, people who swam in clean water, and people that swam in polluted water, and they would try to track the illnesses. These are really difficult studies to carry out. They're very expensive, and they require a lot of people on the beach swimming. And I had shared with the Creeks Advisory Committee that most of those studies showed a very low illness rate in the summer, always a little bit higher for swimmers compared to non-swimmers, and always a little bit higher for swimming in more urban areas compared to more reference areas, but that the risk of illness was very low, and that the illnesses themselves were very mild, things that you would also just catch around the community. So I was always asked, well, why can't we do it? What about surfing? What about swimming in winter? What about swimming in wet weather? Can we do an epidemiology study? And it would just be way beyond the scope of the Creeks Division. But luckily, there was the first wet weather epidemiology study, I think, in the entire world was released a few years ago. And so I just wanted to talk about kind of what that means from a public health perspective, and then for your own kind of thinking about your own individual risk. So the results of the study showed that for every 1,000 surf sessions, and I'm not sure why, but epidemiologists always talk about illnesses per 1,000, or at least water quality studies always talk about illnesses per 1,000 swimmers. But for every 1,000 surf sessions, and this was down in San Diego in front of two rivers. Well, I would say the two rivers that fed into the study area were tested, and they did have a lot of that human waste marker present. I think every sample had some of that human waste marker present. So this is kind of a worst case scenario. For every 1,000 surf sessions, there were 984 healthy surfers at the end of those surf sessions. There were 10 background illnesses, so that would have been the same for people sitting on the beach. Just that was the community illness rate was about 1%. And then 6 what we call excess illnesses from surfing. And in this study, that included a GI, like upset stomach, that included ear ache or ear infection, and sinus pain or sinus infection. And so that's really important information for public health professionals to understand. We should make sure that waters are clean for swimming. But from a personal risk, it's such a low chance of getting sick, and most of the illnesses are quite mild. So we put together some numbers of two different scenarios. One is someone who goes surfing or swimming twice a month, and they're doing it more often in wet weather when the water quality is worse. And so that's going swimming 24 times a year or so, or surfing. And the illness rate is nearly the same as background. So that over the course of the year, you could get unlucky and pick something up, but odds are you wouldn't be picking up any excess illnesses over the background of what you would get normally. Another surfer, say, surfs twice weekly, rain or shine. And over the course of a year, so that's 104 surf sessions, they might pick up an extra half of a GI bug, 1 earache or ear pain, and 1 sinus pain or infection. And so I get phone calls from a lot of, especially parents whose kids want to go surfing after it rains. And when I explain this to them, most of them feel a sense of relief that yes, we have work to do to improve water quality. But when it comes to any of us going surfing ourselves, many of us will feel okay about that. And how does this compare to other risks? So a lot of this is described in odds ratios. So this is the number of people with illnesses from surfing over the illness rate, over the background rate. So for the ocean epidemiology studies, about 2 is on the higher end. So you're twice as likely to get sick if you're swimming in the ocean compared to not swimming. And that, like I said, that sounds high, but the chance of getting sick is so low, and you have to combine those two. So you have a similar odds ratio for going with your kid to get their checkup for catching the flu. For kids in going to preschool, their odds ratio is 3.5, so 3.5 times more sick than background levels of illness. And I think that's anecdotally, that was very true in my household. And for those of us who live with those sick preschoolers, as soon as someone in your house is sick, your odds ratio is 10. So you're 10 times more likely to get sick than compared to when you don't have a sick family member. And then also really high odds of catching colds due to air travel, which I think people are learning can be true with COVID as well. So something that I think about a lot is given that something that I think a lot about is what are we giving up as we continue these weekly indicator bacteria tests and postings. And like I said, I get phone calls from people who are afraid to go swimming. And there's, I think some of what we're doing is we're giving up just the joy of being able to go swimming without worrying about it. And I'm really hopeful that the State Water Board and that the State Water Board could move forward with a more risk-based approach to testing and messaging. This is a place that I used to swim when I was a kid a lot. It's Will Rogers State Beach, and at that time it was the estuary for Rustic Canyon Creek. I was in there all the time with a lot of other kids, just having the time of our lives. And now it is a diversion, so it's diverted to the sanitary sewer during low flow, and swimming is absolutely banned. And I don't think that there are many ecosystem services present in this blocked flow. And the very last thing I'll say is I think there's an environmental justice component here, that there's a lot of reasons to improve water quality, and people like the state water boards and municipalities and public health departments, we all need to keep working on that. But the idea that posting once a week is going to actually improve outcomes for individuals is kind of a false precision. And what I find is that it generally creates a fear of swimming. And it's such a wonderful activity that's absolutely free. Most people have the time of their lives, memories made for a lifetime with friends and family, and that's what we should be encouraging. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Jill. So yes, our viewers, if you are watching on Zoom, you can submit a question in the Q&A field or raise your hand through the Zoom panel if you have a question, and we can allow you to talk to Jill. If you are viewing us on Facebook, you can submit questions there. Jill, I did have one question that was, what is the criteria for a beach warning or closure?
The criteria is that the fecal indicator bacteria that are measured exceed certain numbers. And it's like for Enterococcus, it's 104. And I can't recite them all because they've changed, and because now there's an averaging component that we didn't used to have. But all of that is available on the Santa Barbara County's ocean monitoring page.
Okay, thank you. And so we talked a lot about human waste, but what are the pollutants that are of most concern for water quality?
Oh, the pollutants that are of most concern for water quality? Was that the question?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that is really, so whenever we study pollution, we are looking at a couple of things. We're looking at what is the pollutant at what level, and then what are the organisms that we're trying to protect? Are those creek aquatic insects? Are those human swimmers at the beach? And so there will be different criteria that would be related to a problem for those for any of those organisms. So for creek aquatic organisms, we think that some of the worst players right now are the neonicotinoid pesticides, and we've studied those a lot. And that's like imidacloprid. These are pesticides that have also been implicated in harming bees and pollinators, but they're also washing into the creeks, and we've found them, at all times in any wet weather in all of our creeks, and so that's one pollutant of concern. And then for humans, like I mentioned, any untreated human waste could if there are sick people that are contributing to that human waste, you don't want that in the ocean where we're swimming or anywhere where we're swimming. And then there are also these pollutants we call them either pollutants of emerging concern, or they're called personal care products, contaminants from personal care products. And those are things like the endocrine disruptors, and it's soaps, it's cleaners, it's metabolites, it's any drugs we take that we contribute to sewage. All of this is not just in Santa Barbara, all over the globe, getting into oceans, streams, rivers, lakes, and we don't yet know what the effects of those are. And some of them are extremely long-lived. We call them the forever chemicals, like the PFAS, the PFAS, that are in flame retardants and plastics.
Thanks, Jill. And then, okay, so another question is, there has been some talk with the County Board of Supervisors recently about taking treated sewage and using it for drinking water. What do you think of that?
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat that a little more slowly?
Sure. Sorry. Talk at the County Board of Supervisors about treated sewage, using that for drinking water. Have you heard anything about this?
So like toilet to tap kind of.
Yes.
I don't know enough to answer that for Santa Barbara itself. I do think that we're going to have to do something, drastically different to keep living with this many people through drought in Southern California. And I think that will probably have to be one of the strategies. Obviously, the water is going to have to be treated at a level that is going to be safe for everyone. No one's going to go drinking the recycled water that's coming out right now. That's why all those pipes say, do not drink. There are all kinds of the contaminants of emerging concern that I was talking about that get through, that we've tested that. So to make it happen in a way that is healthy for everyone is still, I think the science, I could be wrong. It's probably happening like in Australia somewhere, but at this point, we need more work here and it would happen before we're drinking it. So I would say, on a personal level, generally, I am supportive. The devil is in the details. And there's a situation in Orange County where they're doing a lot of infiltration of that water so that it goes underground and spends decades in the aquifer before it gets turned into drinking water. But they are finding that they might be having a problem with these forever chemicals. So they're going to have to find ways to remove those before we could drink that water.
Okay, thank you. So to our viewers, again, if you have any questions for Jill, please type them into the Q&A session or raise your hand. We are right in the midst of our annual Creek Week celebration. It runs through Saturday, and we have still quite a lot of events going on. If you'd like to meet Jill and chat with her in person, she will be at Mission Creek at East Beach tomorrow morning from 9:30 to 10:30 for our second Coffee at the Creek event. We have a tour tonight of the Upper Arroyo Burrow restoration at Barger Canyon. We have tomorrow night a tour of our current restoration project going on at the Andre Clark Bird Refuge. And Thursday night, we'll be doing a craft event at the Crafters Library downtown. So quite a lot still left on the schedule. You can visit sbcreekweek.com or follow along Facebook at SB Creek Week. So I will just put out a last call for questions here before we wrap up. Not seeing any hands raised or questions in the Q&A panel. Oh, here we go. Okay, Monique says, could you explain once more what the best indicator of fecal matter is if it is not necessarily fecal indicator bacteria?
Okay, that is a great question. And I really did rush through any of those methods. There is no single perfect indicator, and I really wish there were. The one that we use the most is called, the jargon is HF183, which is an absolutely meaningless abbreviation. It's a section of DNA that's from bacteria that are in the guts of humans, but not other animals. So they're called, there's this kind of bacteria called Bacteroides, and they have very species specific strains. And so we can get the DNA that is unique to the strain that's in human guts. We can get the DNA that's unique to the strain in seagull feces, pigs, cows, and we call these, we're just calling them human waste markers or a gull marker or dog marker. I think there's pig, cattle, and I think that's about it. So, but they're not perfect. And then there are some other methods. We're using this community fingerprinting method where the DNA from all of the bacteria are amplified and measured in a sample. And so you get like a fingerprint of that sample, and it's compared to samples that are taken from your known sources, like some sewage samples or some open ocean samples or a septic tank sample. And you compare those fingerprints and you can kind of see which of those could be contributing to your environmental sample. That's a pretty new method. All of these are way more expensive than the fecal indicator bacteria tests and generally take longer to get results, although people are working on making these rapid methods as we speak. And in fact, the county is working on a project to have a more rapid method for doing their weekly testing. It's still indicator bacteria based, but they should get the results a lot sooner.
Okay, thanks, Jill. So I'm not seeing any additional questions. So as I mentioned, we are recording this presentation. We will post it on our YouTube page, which is at SB Creeks Division. Jen, did you have a question?
I do. I was just going to say, you touched on things like when we use the sewage sniffing dogs and some of the kind of more unique and exciting at the time, new methods that we've used in the past. Is there anything exciting and new that you are foreseeing on the horizon to kind of, whether it's new methods of research or new methods of treatment?
The thing that I'm most excited about right now is the idea of a benchtop qPCR machine, which is the qPCR is the amplifying of the DNA. And right now, to get that done, I'm going to say it's 500 to 1,000 per sample, depending on how many markers you're going to have it tested for, and you get the results in quite a bit later. So you can't just say let's go work our way up a storm drain network, for example, to see where this is coming from. But in the food science industry, they've developed benchtop machines and then kits that can be used. And you get a kit for, say, for example, HF183. If we could get that set up, we could, we and nonprofits and the counties and many groups could afford these methods, and we would have, I think they'd be about $40 a sample. And I've been kind of in and out of talks with someone, and COVID really, the company that I was working with, COVID just took all of their energy, and I've been trying to get them back interested. If we could get that going, that would revolutionize our ability to collect and more samples for cheaply and really be able to figure out where stuff is coming from quickly.
All right. So again, I would just like to thank everybody for tuning in, and remember that Creek Week runs through this Saturday. You can visit sbcreekweek.com or find us on Facebook at SB Creek Week, and we hope to see you out there. Thank you so much for tuning in. All right.
Thanks, everyone.